also online listeners today, as this is a live meeting. Um, this committee advises and recommends to the State Board of Education how to implement the North Carolina Driver Education Strategic Plan and other issues related to driver education and traffic safety. If at any time during the meeting you have comments, please speak clearly into your microphone so it can be recorded. And if you're in the audience and have questions, go ahead and just raise your hand. Cindy will be helping to facilitate on the chat and the discussion and letting us know as well. But I'll also be able to see all of that. So, but please wait to be recognized before you speak. Once you raise your hand, we'll go ahead and recognize you. Our agenda and materials are available online through the DPI website. It's www.dpi.nc.gov, and then on the driver education section page. The meeting's also audio streamed through a link located at the bottom of the Driver Education Advisory Committee page. I now need to read an ethics statement that's required of us for this advisory committee. Committee members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this committee. Does any member of this committee know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before us on the agenda at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record, and at any time during the meeting, if you find out or if you find one, please go ahead and raise your hand and we'll recognize you to state that. Let's see, it will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on any matter that you feel there's a conflict of interest for you. Okay. At this time, I want to, I know the meeting minutes have just been resent out to everybody along with the agenda. I want to go ahead and just, if you've looked over those minutes, have a motion to approve the minutes from the previous DEAC meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So
and go ahead and who's that, Mike?
yeah, Mike Newsom.
Okay, Mike Newsom. And do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, and who just spoke? I'm sorry.
That was Rick Rickman.
Rickman. Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm sorry. I should have asked you to state your name because we're still virtual and it's just a little more difficult. But
you should know that voice.
I know. Are there any? Is there any opposite? Rather than having a vote, is there any opposition to the minutes by anybody in the advisory committee, or any changes that they feel need to be made? Okay. What we're going to do is at this time, you also have a copy of the agenda. I'm going to have Ms. Cindy Taylor go ahead and take a roll call, and as you hear your name and you state present, also just state that you approve the agenda, or you'll sound like a politician kind of doing a commercial, but just say that you approve the agenda along with your stating your presence. So I'll go ahead and pass on over to Cindy Taylor for roll call.
Thank you, Devin. If they'll say they approve the agenda and the minutes, that would be wonderful. Devin Tanner.
Here, and I approve both the agenda and the minutes.
Marvin Smith.
I'm here and I approve both the agenda and the minutes.
Craig Uzel.
Here and I approve the agenda.
Dave Machado.
Present, and I approve the agenda.
Kevin Harrison.
I am here and I approve the agenda and minutes.
Carol Ann Hutchins. Mark Ezel. Stephen Lowry.
I approve the agenda and minutes.
Paul DeLuey.
Present, and I approve the agenda and minutes.
Michael Newsom.
Present, and I approve the agenda and minutes.
Igon Kapikian,
Present, and I approve the agenda and the minutes.
Dr. Sinead Flood, Captain Ronald Elkins. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Dr. Flood.
I'm present. I
Yep.
approve the agenda and the minutes.
Thank you. Captain Ronald Elkins,
Present, and I approve the agenda in the minutes.
Martin Rickman,
Present, and I approve the agenda in the minutes.
Natalie O'Brien,
Here, and I approve the agenda and the minutes.
Doug Eller,
And this is Doug Eller, and I approve the meeting.
okay, and last, Wyatt Smith. Thank you, Mr. Tanner.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a quorum based upon our roll call?
Yes, we have 14.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for helping us with that, Cindy. Really appreciate it. We have some new committee members that have that this is their first meeting here with us on the advisory committee, and I just want to take just a minute or two to recognize those three and have them unmute themselves and introduce themselves and just a little bit about what you do. So the first person that I want to introduce is Hygon. And Hygon, I'm going to let you pronounce your last name once more for me, but if you would introduce yourself.
My name is Hygon Kapikian. I'm used to spelling it, pronouncing it, and giving a brief history of my background, but I'll skip that today. So it's Kapikian, and my first name is Hygon. I work for Commissioner Mike Causey, the insurance commissioner. I oversee all 100 counties. I have a team of regional directors. There are presently 6 of us. And we do a lot of community outreach. We work with constituents. We work with elected officials. We work with municipal leaders. We represent the commissioner in public. We also work on coordinating his itinerary when he is out doing community outreach programs. Very excited to be here, and I thank you for having a representative from DOI.
We appreciate having you on, Hygon. Hygon is replacing Kathy Short, who is previously the vice chair of the DEAC, and so we appreciated all of her efforts and are grateful to have you on in her stead now that her time with us is over. The next person I want to have introduce himself is Dave Machado.
All right, thank you very much. I am the director of the Office of Charter School. I've been in this position a little over 5 years now. We have 204 charter schools that will be opening up or have already opened up this fall, and about 135,000 students. So I certainly appreciate being at this table. Before coming to DPI and the Office of Charter School, I was a director of the Lincoln Charter School, which for the last 15 years, previous 15 years, it's located in beautiful Lincoln County. It's a K-12 school with just over 2,000 students. And before that, I was a small business owner. So I have private and public experience, and I am very happy to be at the table. Thank you.
That's great. I am Dave. I am the coordinator here in Wake County, and even though it's run by Wake County Public School System, we have tons and tons of charter schools and private schools and homeschool kids that are not part of the public school system. So it's great to have you on. You'll be a great source of information, probably not only just for me, but for a lot of other stakeholders here. So I appreciate you being on. And then the last but not least, I want to introduce Mr. Kevin Harrison. Kevin, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, I am the section chief in DPI for school transportation services. So we deal with all of the school bus transportation.
Wow, that has got to be a huge job, especially right now. What
It's
you guys
busy.
are going through. So
It is busy.
okay, well, we appreciate you coming on and helping us out. Grateful for all of the efforts of everybody on the board and those who also provide input on the board. So thank you. I also want to go ahead and announce that Mr. Marvin Smith is now that that Kathy is her time as the vice chair is up. Mr. Marvin Smith has stepped up to take that position, and so I just wanted to let Marvin know how much I appreciate him. I've known Marvin now for quite a while, and he and I have worked together in other capacities. So it'll be great, Marvin, to be able to work together on this advisory committee. Marvin, you want to just say a couple of words?
Well, I'll just say hello and thank you for the opportunity to serve. Driver's education is near and dear to my heart. It's been a big part of my life for about 30 years, and I really enjoy working with the students.
Thank you. Thank you. And it'll be good to be working side by side with you, Marvin.
Devin, if
Yes.
I may interrupt, although Captain Elkins is took over in the middle of the term of the previous captain over there at the North Carolina Highway Patrol, but Captain Ron Elkins is now a full-fledged appointed member by the State Board of Education. You can acknowledge him. Let him say a few words.
Is Captain Elkins on with us?
Yes.
Okay. Captain, if you'd be willing to, I'm grateful that you're here. If you'd be willing to just introduce yourself.
Be glad to. Captain Ron Elkins. I am assigned at the Archdale building. I'm the assistant director of field operations for basically all 100 counties across the state for the Highway Patrol, and look forward to being a part of this process.
Great. Thank you so much, Captain, not just for being with us, but for everything that you do in your career. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and move up the agenda to our DPI update. And at this point, I'll go ahead and allow Carl Logan to take the floor.
Thank you, Devin. I was trying to time the update here. Jamie Falconberry with the Government and Community Affairs is going to provide us with an update here in just a minute. I promised him that I'd let him go at 11:20, but Jamie, are you on now? Cindy, do you see him? Whenever he...
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Cindy, nothing like we can be early, can't we? Can you go ahead and share or allow Jamie to be a presenter?
Yes.
Take it away, Jamie.
Sure. Let me load up the PowerPoint. Okay. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. So I just want to thank everybody. My name is Jamie Falconberry. If I haven't had the chance to, I think I've talked to you a few months ago, but I do the government affairs for Superintendent Truitt, work with Freebird, who's on the state board side. And I'm just going to briefly go over what's been going on with the budget, to give you kind of high level, and then just really speak about the one provision that we were able to get in the House budget as it relates to driver's ed. And then I'll open up for a couple questions if anybody's got anything specific, but trying to get my thing to move. Okay, perfect. So just a budget update. As many of you know, the Senate did their version back in June. Last week, the House presented their version of Senate Bill 105, which is the budget, and it had bipartisan support and is now going back over to the Senate. If they haven't already conferenced it, it will be conferenced shortly. And that's when all the major work gets done and the big decisions get made. We were hoping that we might have a budget by Labor Day, but it might be a week or so after that. and we anticipate the conferees to be noticed soon, and that work to get done. Just some high level stuff for you. In the Senate, this is the House, but I'll just tell you the Senate, they gave teachers an average raise of about 3%, the House at about 5.5%. But for in the House budget, they included for school support staff like custodians, bus drivers, and whatnot, a minimum salary of $13 to $15 an hour. We were very excited to see that. That's something that the superintendent's been championing. But what I do think is interesting is that in the House version, there are going to be state employees who are going to get a $500 bonus, as well as some across the board raises. But what I did think was very interesting is for your schools is that both the House and the Senate had roughly about $1,800 worth of bonuses for their teachers in both their budgets. So we would expect to hopefully see that teachers and school employees would get those $1,800 bonuses. Principals and others get other type of bonuses, but that's just something to keep in mind. Some other highlights that were in the House budget this past week was master's pay was restored, maternity leave for teachers up to 8 weeks. A lot of districts we've heard only have about 5 or 6 weeks for maternity leave. So this was something that superintendent's been championing, but also a lot of them in the General Assembly. And then I want to touch base about the special provisions that are in the budget. There were a lot, especially in the House. And here's some of the major ones. But what I wanted to focus on was this specific driver's education funding in ESSER 3. This is something that we've been really pushing for to help a lot of the programs around the state fill in the gaps in the backlogs when everything was shut down last year due to COVID. So the House appropriated $324,000. Obviously, that still needs to go to the Senate too, but we're very hopeful that this gets through to kind of help you out with the backlog. And any other issues that you have regarding with driver's ed statewide because of what COVID has brought upon our school systems. Now, I know a lot of you were probably hoping for some other significant changes with driver's ed, but I just want to let you know that we continue to have these conversations with the General Assembly, but there's a lot of concern about creating new funding or propping up new programs for this upcoming year, because we really don't know what's going to happen with this funding cliff that I'm sure many of you have heard about. Once all this federal money that has been pouring into the states goes away, what are we really going to encounter with state revenues coming next year? And so both the House and Senate are really taking a fiscally responsible approach to not spending all the rainy day fund and not spending all the money that's currently available, because we are anticipating that there might be a funding cliff coming this upcoming fiscal year. So we're really trying to be cognizant of that. And I understand where the General Assembly is coming from. So when you didn't see other funds or coming in for their driver's education, just know that there's a lot of programs out there that are in the same situation. But what we're trying to do is at least keep everything that needs to be afloat, and then we address stuff in the short session or the year after that once we get through the COVID-19. And then I'm just showing you in the Senate, they didn't have that many special provisions, but in the House, they had a bunch of special provisions. None really focused on driver's ed. There was there was a mention of it when they were reorganizing residential schools, but that it's not something that we really need to get into details about. So with that, I kind of just want to, you can see how many special provisions there were in the House. And we'll see if those get any movement with the Senate. A lot of these special provisions, just so you all know, in the House were bills that had moved from the House to the Senate and were not considered. So we'll see if the Senate considers any of these as standalone bills or in the budget after conference. So I'll leave it to that. Carl, do you have anything or anything else?
some of especially the districts may be interested in the driver eligibility that was, it was a bill at one time, but we've had, obviously with COVID, there's been a huge impact on students not being able to make progress. And I think that the legislation or legislators were considering relaxing or at least putting a pause on that until next spring. Has there been any additional discussion on that? I hate putting you on the spot. I think
No, that's good. Yeah, and because you and I have had conversations too on this, and so it's good for everybody else to hear it as well. So, yeah, there was legislation out there, and it was moving kind of fast. So I think everybody, their antennas went up when they saw it moving really fast, and then it kind of just stopped in the chambers. And I think it's so people could get stuff through crossover and whatnot. But and Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we dug into it, there were less students during the COVID year that had not been able to get their driver's license because of grades or whatever the reasons are because of the law than in years past. And when we were looking at the department, and yeah, Carl.
yes, Mike Newsom and his staff at DMV provided us with some data that showed us that there was a significant decrease in the number of students who were denied their driver eligibility certificates, so that they were denied getting their permits or licenses, and also the number of kids who had actually had them taken away. So
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, what was good about this is I think the law was actually being put into effect pretty well, because the law allows for the local administration or the school board to say, you know what, we kind of give a student a waiver if they were an A student their entire career, and now we see that they're struggling and it's because of virtual learning. We're going to give them a waiver to still get their driver's license. And so I do know that there are many students out there that felt that the virtual learning was not beneficial to them, and that they weren't able to get their driver's license or their permit because of this. But after running through the numbers with Carl and the DMV, the numbers were actually dramatically down. And to us, that showed that school boards and local administrators were working with students to be fair throughout this entire process. So we will continue to monitor it. We've shared that information with the General Assembly too, so that might be reasons why they've kind of paused that legislation. But if it does move, I'll be in contact with Carl and he can let everybody know about it.
I think I see one of the representatives from our legal staff in Brandon Walker. Would it be fair to say, Jamie, that COVID-19 could be seen as a disability in somewhat, and that there are hardship exemptions already in state Board of Education?
Yeah, and that's actually, if Brandon wants to talk, but we had specific conversations with Allison, who's the chief legal counsel here and Brandon's boss. And that was exactly what we came up with too. And that's what we would tell districts when they said, well, what do we do about these students? We would explain to them what the state board policy was and what the law said. And I think a lot of them took that and used that to the benefit of the children, and give them and understand, give them leniency when it was a crazy year last year and we didn't want to hold anybody accountable.
Jamie, this is Chairman Tanner. I've got a quick question real quick about the slide with the additional funds, the 300,000 plus to go toward helping with the backlog. Do you have an idea of what legislator or whoever was drafting this, what ideas were in their mind as far as what, how this money could help reduce a backlog?
Yeah, so this is this is actually something that came from the department and something that we talked with Carl on before. So the ESSER 3 funds, they have to be spent on things that are COVID related. So if this were to get appropriated, we would work with the budget office as well as Latricia Townsend over at Federal Programs to figure out what the RT code would look like. But it would be, you would have to show, or a district would have to access these funds, would have to show that it's COVID related. Now that could be very broad, and we'll work through that, but we wanted to keep the language very broad and not get too specific to have our hands tied or have to go to the General Assembly and ask for an amendment or something like that. So that's why you see it written very vaguely.
Okay.
We will work with districts to address whatever the issues are.
All right.
Yep.
And I can say, you know, being the director here in Wake County, and I know a lot of other counties are in the same situation where our backlog is number one. When we shut down behind the wheel, a lot of us still taught classroom, but then we have a lot of people who never came back, like our behind the wheel drivers and whatnot. So we're down. You know, it's like all the other businesses around. It's a staffing issue.
Yeah, and that's a very good idea. We can look at that. We're using ESSER 2 funds for retention and recruitment to bring people back from either certain school support staff that were laid off because they weren't needed during COVID, and now we're trying to bring them back. I know that with the federal money that's kicked in with unemployment, a lot of people kind of need an incentive to roll off of that. So we're looking at that with ESSER 2 funds. So that is something that we could definitely discuss. And we'd love to have that conversation if and when this money is appropriated.
Perfect. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Jamie. You're welcome to hang around, or I know that you are quite busy, and we were really thankful that you were able to pop in and give us that update. There is no way that I could have done anything anywhere remotely near what you've just provided, and yours and Freeburg McKinney's support of the program has just been astronomical since I've been here, or since you've been here. So it's just great to have you pop in and provide us with that. I look forward to communicating with you more regarding these issues as we go down the road.
No, I appreciate it. And Carl, you've been great to work with, and just keep me apprised of any issues that pop up. I see things popping up. I can't see the whole chat. Is there anything else in the chat I missed? Or if not, I can roll off and let you get back to your meeting.
No, I think what's being discussed right now in the chat is not. I think that's something that can be discussed amongst the advisory committee or you know, personally between members.
Well, cool. Well, that's great. And here's my email once again, if any of you have any problems, but if also just feel free talk with Carl. Carl runs everything by me as well, and we look forward to helping you and moving forward the driver's ed work that you all are champion. So thank you, everybody. Let me see if I can get.
All right.
Stop sharing. There we go. There we go.
Well,
thank you, Jamie.
Thank you again.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Be safe.
All right. Bye now. All right. So as you just heard, a very, very comprehensive and robust report from Jamie Falkenberry, who was with our Government and Community Affairs office there with DPI. Just to give you a little wrap up, a little update on the driver ed section has been quite busy over the last few months. And we had an opportunity to share at the recent 65th annual ADSEA, or the American Driver and Traffic Safety Education Association National Conference that was in Knoxville, Tennessee. And they asked for us to give a high-level view of our new hybrid teacher education program, or what we like to refer to it as the Safety and Traffic Education Program, or STEP. We gave them a high-level view of that. It was we received excellent remarks from the attendees in there, and that many states had asked to have access to it, which we're not able to do at the moment, but that is something that we would like to be able to share with, as you know, in the education world, we steal and borrow from each other quite frequently. But I work with other state administrators who I see now that I'm not sharing. Cindy says, let me see if I can get back there.
I think you're sharing.
I'm not there. Let's see here. I've got so many things open on my screen. At any rate, we were asked to present there. Special thanks to Tanya Easterwood, Angela Stevenson, Reggie Fleich, and Cindy, who helped to facilitate the whole thing. And it was just it was a great show of our program. And Cindy, there it is. Hi, Miss Cindy, am I back?
Yes.
All right, there we go. All right. So, and then last week we had 3 sessions for our annual back to school regional meetings that we had to do virtually this year. Hopefully we'll be able to get back to getting out into the districts and regions to meet with everyone, because we receive a tremendous amount of feedback and support from the districts, and because that's where it happens. We provide the high level overview and the guidance from DPI, but out there is where the rubber meets the roads. And so we really look forward to getting out there, and pardon the pun. We had 3 sessions. There were 2 administrative sessions that were attended by 120. And then we had an education training and a teacher education section that was attended by 72, for a total of 192 participants, which is our highest number of participants in regional workshops. So that gives us some ideas going down the road, even though we like to be out there in the districts, in the local regions. We will probably add an element to virtual attendance to these to ensure that we are able to include everyone and give everyone an opportunity to make recommendations to the table. In 2 weeks, I will be attending a state administrative symposium in Washington. Well, actually, now it's virtual. As of last Friday, the National Highway Transportation Traffic Safety Administration was required to cancel all face-to-face meetings due to the Delta variant on the rise in the country. So this meeting will be virtual, and some of the conversations that we'll be discussing will be emerging issues in driver education, and the same things that are happening here locally in North Carolina are happening nationally. So we will be able to gather ideas and share ideas with other state administrators. I think there's about 21 states that are going to be coming. Again, North Carolina is seen as a leader in the implementation of the national standards. And so we're quite proud of our DPI team for what they provide. Also, that we'll be discussing the role of driver education on the national transportation safety scene. And something that has become very, very obvious to me is that with the collaboration or working with North Carolina Department of Transportation, with their the work groups that they have with updating the strategic plan and working through the processes on improving the safety scenes for transportation in North Carolina. Driver education is the educator role in this whole process, and I truly appreciate that now at this as much work as they've done into that, and I appreciate the opportunity for those. Now, Stephen Lowry, I'm sorry, I went to school with Mike Lowry. Stephen Lowry on our committee is obviously with Department of Transportation. And so thank you all for being here. Administrative wise, we have been collecting data as always, and that thanks Cindy Taylor, who is behind the scenes here. But Cindy, can you give us an update on what this chart means? Cindy is works with all 115 districts, and I believe that all 115 have reported in, Cindy.
Yes, so the chart that you have here, Mr. Logan, just compares the statistics from the 2018-2019 school year, which was pre-COVID, to the 2020-2021 year. And it just shows how close the statistics are and how we're getting back to our normal figures. And even in the last quarter of the 2021 school year, we taught more in the classroom than what we did in 2018, 2019. So it's just real good to get those figures in and see that the program is getting back to normal and the numbers are trending well. And then this graph right here shows a comparison of the last 3 years, and it shows that we're still improving and making progress. And then the orange is the behind the wheel, blue is classroom. So just shows that the numbers are still going back to normal and trending upwards. So that all districts now are reopened and all the programs have restarted. So good news.
And lastly, obviously, or not obviously, but a special thanks to State Superintendent Truitt and Deputy Superintendent Robert Taylor, who popped into our regional meetings to address the attendees. As always, it is a great opportunity to have them to come in and share. Dr. Taylor has been a really staunch advocate of the program, and that he actually popped in for a few minutes and stayed about 20. And so I just really appreciate him popping in. The two of them were heading out to a meeting, so we were just glad that they were able to stop in and address the attendees on the second day. So also with leadership, sometimes she thinks that she can sneak in the room, but she can't. I think Dr. Lynn Harvey is still on. Cindy, is she still here? And Lynn, if you would like to, at any time, you are always welcome to share.
Yes, Dr. Harvey is here.
Did I embarrass her? At any rate, but so she is, she may have walked away from her desk temporarily. But anyway, so this has been a tremendously busy time of year, and we are working with other agencies and other areas, and we'll mention one of those in just a few minutes. We are also transitioning in our second phase of going back to the building. We're due to be 100% back in the building by August 30th. However, regardless of where my team is, it has not impacted our workload. We have been able to adjust working remotely or teleworking, and so it's just my hats off to them for making those adjustments. So at that rate, I believe that concludes what I am going to be talking about, and as far as the DPI update is concerned.
Great. I have picked up on Carl on your first slide, the agenda, which I also printed out that version of the agenda. It differs from the agenda that we were all sent. We have new business coming up first on the agenda that Cindy sent us, followed by subcommittee updates. And on your agenda, on the first slide, it has subcommittees first. Now I know we've got Thomas Zyko, who's going to address us in the new business. So did you want subcommittees to go first before Thomas, or do you want to keep with the original agenda?
Let's go with this one, and there's a reason why, because this is going to build into Mr. Zyko's presentation.
Okay. Do I have? Do I need to?
No.
Okay. All right.
We've already.
All right, I'll go ahead and approve the change to the agenda then. And Vice Chair Smith, I know this is your first time go around on this. Are you prepared to introduce the subcommittees and who's going to report on them based on this agenda that you see up here?
And I can help out, Marvin. I do appreciate you stepping in and and sharing here, but basically this part of the agenda is just the 5 areas of the program, and that I have a couple comments on each one of the areas, but the floor is always open, and you would actually moderate that piece. And pardon us for this administrative adjustment here.
Okay, Carl, if you would go ahead and handle that. I'm kind of unaware that I would be doing this, so I'm not prepared.
Okay, we can roll with it. Okay. As far as the subcommittees for the program administration, we have a continuation of the teacher education program. We're continuing to evaluate and do upgrades to the program. Each time we offer cohorts, these folks are allowed to provide feedback, and then in our office, Dr. Royster Davis and others will make updates and upgrades to the program. The student curriculum implementation project is somewhat on hold. This pilot was completed. However, there are a handful of districts that are wanting to continue using actually all the districts are continuing to want to use the student curriculum that we created. We do not have the funding for this yet. This is one of the things that we had asked for through the legislature, to get it out to all the districts so that it will not impact them as far as funding wise. However, one of the justifications that we gave to the Government Affairs Office is that there are actually 10 districts that are paying more than it would cost to provide this curriculum to everyone in the state, that if they would cease to use the funds that they use for purchasing the same, then we could actually fund the entire state with that. So that was some of the ideas, that we could actually save the state money, and we could save districts money by the creation of this program. And I hope that you understand what I just said. But anyway, so we're hoping that we can get language changed to where we can push this out. I like to describe it as a Cadillac that's in the garage that we can't drive yet. So we will continue working in that particular area, and I hope that we can get this out to everyone very soon. Don't know that if the ESSER fund may assist in that area or not. The question that I was asked yesterday by the Government Affairs Office was that have all of the districts restarted, and regardless of the quality of education. And obviously we know that many districts were thrown into a situation, a real challenging situation to create digitized or the ability to get the program to students. And this would help in that area tremendously. We will just see if it fits the criteria that the state board and the finance office comes up with. Another one of the projects that DPI has going on is we're working with the Division of Motor Vehicles on remote testing with DMV. But Mike, in just a few minutes, I will get to the collaboration with DMV, and I'll let you give a brief update on that. I'll kind of speed through this to get to that point. There is, in our office, we plan on doing an online professional development planning to be able to provide content for licensure for renewals of licenses for the professional teachers. The strategic plan, I know that last spring, we had mentioned that we wanted to create some work groups to update that. Not necessary for a move or a motion or a second, but we have actually requesting, or we're recommending that what we do is we go through at DPI, and we will update the obvious changes and then work on a 2025 plan to present the strategic plan and have that on a 5-year cycle, so that that we will have a 2025 update, a 2030 update, a 2035 update for for future generations. So if we can just do that, if that's okay, then we'll just continue moving on in that direction. We'll save the committee a little bit of work at the moment, but we will be creating some work groups to be able to do that. Cindy and our office, we've been working on this for several years. We are creating a driver education administrative manual. We're trying to figure out how we can get that out to you all to where we can keep this up to date and you would have access to the administrative information that we are frequently requested to provide to the districts, and that gives us an opportunity to deposit all this material and not hold in both of our heads, because both of our heads are about to explode, right, Cindy? In addition to that, there are some needs for the administrative code and policy updates, and this is the part that I will be leading into in just a few minutes with Tom Zyko on the administrative code changes that are needed. Marvin, if I may continue on with education and training. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir, please.
Excuse me. I hate to be too forward. Are there any questions regarding administration from the committee? Hearing none, I will proceed on. Education, this is the student curriculum I was just talking about. The pilot is on extension and we will continue working in that area. There will be some recommendations on curriculum standards, as I just mentioned here, in just a few minutes from the second presentation that we'll be going through. And Marvin, I will continue on without objection. Teacher certification.
Yes,
teacher certification, our fall cohort just started. We have 64 new teachers in the process of going through the program. They are expected to be through at about or before Christmas of this year. There are 20 mentors in that group, or in a separate cohort. These mentors are extensions, or they are receiving a certification from DPI to sign off on the new teachers as they complete the practicums in their local boards of education. So these people are very important as they go through an administrative program and learn what it is that they're to be providing help with or assistance with new teachers, and also finishing the certification process, so these teachers can actually take that material or the documents and submit those to licensure for actual license or certification to be added onto their license. With that, there are needs for NCAC and State Board of Education policy updates. And I did skip over it. I'm sorry, I didn't have a slide. Mike, I'm sorry. Mike with the Division of Motor Vehicles, the driver license chief examiner, one of the chief examiners. Mike, would you kind of give a high-level update on CD?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone. DMV is currently reviewing vendor proposals as a part of the IFP process for driver knowledge testing, as Carl outlined. We officially coined this as the Student Online Testing with DPI, or SOTD, if you will. The design is to afford student drivers with an opportunity for remote automated testing for the level 1 learner permit. This provides a convenience as well as saves on potential repeated trips to DMV. Unfortunately, our process was delayed due to pandemic impacts that resulted in shifts to operational priorities, but we're trying to regain that schedule currently. Again, we are currently reviewing the technical requirements for this capability and have not yet engaged with DPI on requirements or scope for operational deployment. We do know that some states have successfully implemented an online test application for graduated licensing for convenience, for mitigation in lieu of the pandemic, and to reduce duplication of efforts, which is in itself a priority for the DMV Commission. And so generally, this is our aim. Are there any questions? Okay, Carl, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Mike. that somewhat concludes that particular area. What I'd like to do is I want to introduce Mr. Thomas Zyko, who is the State Board of Education legal specialist. And Tom, rather than me trying to fumble through and give this high level, why don't you go ahead and just take over, and I'll support you in whatever ways that we can.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Very good, very good. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I've been working on this presentation for a while, and it's brought back memories of my own driver education experience, which I hate to admit was in 1969, 62 years ago. I remember struggling to parallel park the whale-sized family station wagon while my father sat in the seat and told me to turn. No, not that way, the other way. So that was driving in 1969. I don't even know if parallel parking is still part of the driving test, but I'm pretty sure fathers are still telling their sons and daughters to turn. But to illustrate how important driver education continues to be, this very morning, I opened my online version of the New York Times and there was a headline about a fatal crash involving a Tesla on autopilot. The article says the driver was operating on autopilot and he was on a cell phone call when he dropped his phone. When he bent down to look for it, tragically, neither he nor the autopilot noticed that the road was ending. The car drove through a stop sign and a flashing red light before it crashed into a parked car and killed a 22-year-old college student. After the crash, the driver told the investigating trooper, "It happened so fast." The article illustrates so many changes in life that you can't even mention them, in life, in cars, and driving. And these are all issues that you're going to have to deal with. It's really not too extreme to ask, what will driver education look like when cars drive themselves and instruction is virtual? I have not got the background or the professionalism that you have to answer that question. But I do want to thank you for the opportunity to help you work on those issues and moving forward with driver education for the future. So with that, I don't know who's running the slides. Do we have another slide, Carl? I just wanted to give a background on how we got here. Back in May of this year, DOT got an email from the Rules Review Commission staff, which questioned DOT's authority over the curriculum for unlicensed persons taking driver education under the age of 18. Their particular rule was 3I0307. Although there is statutory authority for the commissioner to state requirements for a school, commercial school licensing, and establish the course of instruction for commercial schools, it's also true that the State Board of Education has control over the curriculum in the public schools. And so with the dual statutory authority, the Rules Review Commission questioned DOT DMV's authority to control the curriculum over commercial driving schools. So at present, rather than challenging RRC's position, that email prompted DOT and DMV and the state board and DPI to begin exploring a unified driver training curriculum for programs that are offered in and through public high schools and through the commercial driver training schools. In other words, to unify the instructional course of study for all the driver education in the state. There are clearly benefits of that. There's an awful lot of overlap between the high school programs and the commercial programs. I think Carl has told me that 64 of our school districts contract with commercial driver training instructors to provide instruction to their students. And obviously, there are many, up to 100 different commercial driver training schools in the state offering instruction to students over 18 or people over 18 years of age. And it would be very useful for the state to have consistent instruction for all those students. In fact, it's hard to justify having different modes of instruction, different courses of instruction. After all, everyone's on the road together. Furthermore, if we had a unified curriculum in one place, it would facilitate the necessary changes going forward. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, driverless cars, how are we going to deal with that? Safety features in new cars, new highways, express lanes. There are so many things that need to be taught these days in driver education. And things, I don't need to tell you, are just going to continue to move faster and faster. It would behoove us to have a system where the amendments to the curriculum can be made efficiently and reasonably quickly, although reasonably quickly for the Rules Review Commission, as you all know, is months and months of work. So what are we looking at when we talk about driver education curriculum? There is a difference in education between what is known as a standard course of study and a curriculum. A standard course of study, like the standard course of study that the State Board of Education and DPI implement for, say, mathematics or language, English language, literacy, social studies, the major academic subjects, is a general objective. They establish general objectives. For example, in mathematics, the general objective is that students will know their multiplication tables by the end of 4th grade. That's a standard course of study. A curriculum is how the student learns that objective. What tools do they use? What lesson plans are there? How do you move the student forward to the ultimate objective? The statutes that we're dealing with talk about a course of instruction and a curriculum for driver education. So, for example, if you were to adopt a standard course of study for driving, you might say that students will know how to safely brake a vehicle. And that would be the general objective. That would be the standard course of study. The curriculum would be a more detailed explanation of how brakes work, how the weight of the vehicle, speed of the vehicle affects stopping distances, the use of a simulator, behind the wheel experience, driving at increasing speeds, et cetera, et cetera. So in the curriculum, you're going to be drilling down into how the objectives of the training program are achieved. And I reference that because both the statutes that govern DPI and State Board and DOT and DMV talk about curriculum in a course of instruction. The existing rules that you all have, both the statutes and existing rules, actually outline a standard course of study. That is, they are general objectives. The means for achieving the objectives are not detailed in the rules. In fact, if you look at 19A, 03I, 0307, it actually says that the driver training school is responsible for the curriculum. The curriculum has to be approved, but the driver training school is responsible for coming up with the curriculum. So one of the issues that you all are going to have to deal with when you move forward on this is, do you want to propose and enact in rules a standard course of study for driver training? Or do you want to drill down and actually come up with a curriculum and dictate the curriculum to both the public school teachers and your commercial driver training school instructors? There are various sources, and you know better than I, the sources for that level of instruction. There are national standards for driver training. There are the DOT DMV driving manual. You've got a permit test, and there are outside. There are rules and standards existing outside of DMV and the State Board of Education that explain what good driving instruction should be. We also have to look at, what are the objectives of the course beyond just teaching to the driving test or the permit test. To that point, General Statute 115C 215, which governs the state board's driver education program, says that the driver education program shall be for the purpose of making available public education to all students on drivers' safety and training. Safety and training. The statute does not say that the driver education program exists just to qualify the learners to pass the learner's permit or the driver licensing test. So one of the questions you're going to have to deal with as you move forward is, are you happy with the level of objectives in the curriculum in the existing rules, or do you want to drill down and become more detailed and more dictatorial about what driver education is? And that's going to have an important impact on how you approach your rules. The purpose of a rule is to be enforced. The only reason to have a rule is to tell somebody else what they must do and to effectively punish them if they don't do what you tell them to do. Under the statutes governing the OAH and the Rules Review Commission, the purpose of a rule, it says that an agency shall not seek to implement or enforce against any person a policy, guideline, or other interpretive statement that meets the definition of a rule, unless the rule has been adopted in accordance with their statutes. And then when you look at what the definition of the rule is, you'll see that a rule is any agency, regulation, standard, or statement of general applicability that implements or interprets an enactment of the General Assembly. A rule does not include non-binding statements. So the reason I illustrate that is that when you're looking at your standard course of study, your objectives, or your curriculum, you've always got to keep in mind, how are we going to enforce this? Are we just going to say, we think you should be doing this? Or are you going to require the schools and the commercial driving schools to do it? And are you going to have an enforcement mechanism? Is it going to be binding? If it's not binding, you don't need to go through the rulemaking process. But I suspect you're going to want to make what you do binding. You're going to want to enforce it. So the question you have to ask is how are you going to enforce it? What mechanisms are you going to utilize to be sure that the curriculum, the standard course of study that you adopt is actually being taught in the schools? And then moving on from that, of course, once you start talking about sanctions, once you start talking about enforcing a policy, you've got to be clear, you've got to be sure that your rules are in fact enforceable. And this is a very big deal for the Rules Review Commission. Rules Review Commission really only has two things that they do. They check rules to see that the agency that's proposing them has the authority. In other words, the General Assembly has given you the authority to act in this area. And I think it's quite clear that if nothing else, DOT and the State Board of Education acting together have the authority to dictate the curriculum for driver training across the state. The Rules Review Commission might have had questions about whether DOT had the exclusive authority, but there's no doubt that working together, the State Board and DOT have the joint authority to control it. But the question is, what will that rule say and how will it be enforced? And the next thing that the Rules Review Commission is interested in, other than authority, is ambiguity. They do not like vague language. If you're going to have a rule, it has to be specific. Anyone who's brought rules to the Rules Review Commission knows that their staff are very particular about the words that are used in your rules. You can't have any doubt about the obligation because the obligation is enforced. People that don't meet the obligation can be punished. And the Rules Review Commission insists that their obligations be absolutely clear. So when you write your rules, you can't have any ambiguities. That means that you've got to structure your rules carefully. You've got to have very clear definitions. You've got to make sure that when you define terms, you use the terms consistently. You don't want to be jumping around and using different terms. And this highlights something that Carl's got on the slide now, is you should make sure that if you're going to look to national standards, if you're going to go look to the DOT manual, if you're going to be looking at your permit test, you need to have consistent terminology across the board in order for the system to work correctly. Your policies, your rules, your tests, your enforcement should all use consistent language, which means that you have to think very carefully about what you mean when you adopt your terms. The next thing is that your sanctions will have to be defined. What are you actually going to do to people who don't follow the rule? And there needs to be an enforcement mechanism for implementing those sanctions. That could lead to, of course, a complaint by any school that you're going to sanction. They're going to say that they met the rule or that the rule was vague and they met the obligations of the rule. So you've got to be thinking down the road to being in court and fighting with somebody over your rules. So that's the background from a legal perspective of your task. You've got to decide how detailed you want your rules to be, what your enforcement mechanism is going to be, and work really hard on making the rules clear. All of this takes a great deal of time. The first thing you would have to do is to yourselves or your agencies, DOT and the State Board, would have to work on the rules and approve the rules internally. And then you would have to send them to OAH to be filed and published and accept public comments. Then you have to wait 60 days, then you have to review the public comments, then you have to send the rule back to OAH with any changes that result from the public comments. Then OAH puts it on their calendar for the Rules Review Commission. The Rules Review Commission reviews it. They send back their technical changes. You can do technical changes and corrections for a long time. And finally, you might get it through Rules Review Commission. But getting the Rules Review Commission to approve your rule doesn't mean that it becomes a rule. There's a provision in the statutes that if 10 people anywhere object to the rule, then the rule does not become effective until after the legislature has had an opportunity to look at it and review it. So just to give you an idea of how long this might be, if you were to publish your course of study curriculum next week, if you could do all the work necessary to get this done next week, the very first date that that rule could be effective would be January 1st of 2022. If there were 10 objections, that rule could not be effective until June of 2022. So this is a long-term project, and it would behoove you to make sure that it's done right the first time, because every amendment to the rule will take just as much time. So that's a general overview of the task that lies ahead of you, and that doesn't even encompass the issue of what it is you actually want to teach. That's just the nuts and bolts of getting what you want to teach into an enforceable rule. And obviously, I and other legal staff will be there to help you with that. And hopefully it will go well. But as you know, going back to the May, the Rules Review staff, the Rules Review Commission staff can be very particular. And we've got to anticipate that there will be feedback from them on anything you do. So with that, Carl, I'll open it up to discussion about what you think the objectives of the program should be, you know, the content for the curriculum, what you think enforcement mechanisms might be, and what your timeline for taking action might be. When do you want to get this all done?
Well, Tom, what I'd like to do first is you and I have had a number of conversations regarding this over the past several months. And can you review very quickly? I know that the committee here is wondering, like, what in the world is going on here? But it's like, but how did we get here? Could you review that and at the beginning of our conversations and what you came to me originally with? And what my thoughts are here is to make sure that everybody's on the same page and then move forward with a number of questions. When Tom and I were discussing this, every question or possible solution led to another question. And then we felt like that this was so big that we needed your assistance on, and obviously your diverse backgrounds would help to provide us with the missing pieces. And so, Tom, could you review again on how you got drawn into this DMV administrative code?
Okay, so back in May, I mean, heretofore, previously, you've had two sets of courses of instruction, curriculum. You've got what the State Board of Education has approved for instruction provided through the public school system, whether that is by teachers in the public schools and employed by the public schools, or the public schools using their state funding to contract with commercial schools. In both those instances, the state board required that the curriculum, the course of instruction, be the course of instruction that the state board had approved. Under 2322, DOT and DMV have authority for licensing commercial driver training for people who are over 18 years of age. And they have used that, previously had used that authority to develop a curriculum for commercial driver training that was in 19A NCAC 03I 0307. That was their rule for their curriculum. When they proposed that rule to Office of Administrative Hearings, the Rules Review Commission, one of the staff at the Rules Review Commission raised questions about DOT's authority to control the curriculum for those students. They particularly raised the question about the joint authority over the curriculum with the State Board of Education. And they sent the rule back to DOT, DMV to respond to their questions about their authority to control that curriculum in commercial driving schools. That prompted a discussion with professional staff about moving forward with, rather than contesting that, rather than fighting with the Rules Review Commission and OAH over the authority, it prompted a discussion about moving forward with a unified curriculum, with one curriculum, one set of rules, easily accessed by both the public schools and the commercial driver training schools, one set of enforcements, one place where everyone could look, one way to do amendments, and to unify the system rather than having two separate curricula, standard courses of study, one for the public high schools and one for the commercial driver training schools. So this is the Rules Review Commission's inquiry prompted a discussion about unifying the two systems. And that's what this is about, what the process would be for unifying those systems. It would be reasonably easy for DMV, DOT to enact a rule saying that commercial driver training schools shall utilize the same curriculum that the State Board of Education adopts. That would be a simple rule to enact. But it only works well if both agencies in agreement on what that curriculum should be. And since DOT and DMV are doing the testing and are responsible for the safety of our highways, of course, it makes tremendous sense for them to work closely with the state board on developing the curriculum for the people, for instructing the people that are going to be driving on those highways. So that's the background for this, that there's an effort now and a desire to unify the curriculum for the benefit of the public and for the ease of enforcement. But the two curriculum have not been the same before, and it's going to take work to decide what should be in that curriculum and how it should be enforced. So that's the general background for this.
Okay. So Chairman Tanner, at the if it's permissible for you, to you as the chair, if it's possible, can we throw this open to open discussion, and that obviously the committee members will adhere to all of the previously stated guidelines of making comments on the floor of this this committee open meeting. and all those protocols will still be in place. What Tom and I did not want to do is we don't want to give too much of our opinion on what we came up with. We would like to hear what you think of what you just heard. We know that it's quite confusing, but any questions will most likely help to steer us in a direction of something that we can make a recommendation to you. Obviously, my feelings are that whatever we decide needs to go through you eventually for your approval and according to the guidelines that Tom just laid out for us. So, Chairman Tanner, if it's okay with you, can we move forward with that?
Yes, Carl, I'd like to go ahead and open the forum for public comment and questions. I see we have a hand raised by Lindsay Jones. Lindsay, do you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. My computer keeps on messing up and it keeps on
That's
popping
okay.
up by mistake. Every time I touch it, it goes up. I can't get it off. So sorry about that.
That's fine. We love virtual meetings, don't we? I guess I had a quick question with regard to, you know, I'm sure that the oversight at DOT is different than what Carl has to deal with oversight of 100 different counties and all of their LEAs and all of that. So even if oversight was able to happen, what who would, so if it's a standard curriculum with a standard enforcement policy, and it's, let's say it's a private driving school, who enforces the rules over the private driving schools? Which entity would that be? DOT or would that be DPI?
Tom, I can handle that one, and you can also join in with that one. But obviously, this administrative code request does not impact oversight, the oversight pieces. DOT or DMV would still have their oversight responsibilities, and DPI would still have their responsibilities for the districts.
Okay. Does this in any other way, I guess Marvin, I hope I'm not throwing Marvin under the bus here. He had a couple questions for me, and we had a quick discussion yesterday, but and he understands the private side of it better than I do. I'm an LEA coordinator who hires a private driving school to do driver's ed here in Wake County. But Marvin, do any of those questions that you had asked me yesterday, is that something that you want to bring up, any of that, with regard to how does it affect the private side?
Well, that it does bring up a lot of questions. I mean, with a private school, I'm licensed. I'm, ruled over or corrected if I'm doing something wrong by the DMV at this point in time. Now, being contracted with the state, the DPI, I understand they got the curriculum. They say, here, Mr. Driving School, this is what you do. Okay, but if I, as a private driving school, does something in the curriculum that the DPI doesn't like, but my local coordinator that I work with the LEA, that local coordinator approves it. Well, who would come after me to say, hey, Marvin, you're doing this wrong? This is the penalty. Would the penalty be enforced against me as a commercial driving school? Or would it be enforced against the LEA because I had a coordinator of the LEA's approval to do something that was a little off from the state issued curriculum? Kind of a long question, but I hope I've explained what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I can appreciate your question there, Marvin, and I am about to share something on the screen. This is currently in administrative code, and again, these are questions these are thought processes that Tom and I shared, but we weren't really, we could speculate on what we thought or how this would impact people, but what exactly how does this impact the stakeholders in this? And so what you're talking about is this, and this is currently in the DPI administrative code. Basically states that all contractors shall specifically require the contractor to adhere to the requirements in the existing rules that we have. And the existing rules include the term of the contract that you currently have that has a scope in it. So in essence, that you're following what the scope of the contract states for you in according to administrative code. If I explain that, I was trying to jump between being practical and and legal at the same time. So does that answer your question?
Well, no, I understand that, and I stated that. But you know, the DPI puts out the program and says that this is the one we have to adhere to. But if there was a part to it that there was a situation unique to a local LEA, and I, with the LEA coordinator, decided to do something a little bit different from the DPI curriculum, then if there was an enforcement action, would it be against me as a private commercial driving school through the DMV, or would it be against the LEA who is contracted with me and responsible for my oversight?
I will tell you this, that I don't know if Brandon is still on the call. Brandon Walker is with our the legal counsel for DPI. We have been working on a contractor template that will help to alleviate some of those questions. But yes, I don't want to get too much off into that area there, because that's not really dealing with the question that we have regarding this administrative code need. But you're right. Those are questions that will be answered once we decide which direction we're going to go with this particular, or let's say this, they will be clarified once, further clarified once we continue in the direction that we are here. So the question again remains is basically, is there a need for thinking about unification of the programs? Because if we're talking about the state superintendent and the commissioner collaborating and approving the curriculum for the commercial schools, then it also pushes DPI into creating standards for the public school program. And when you do that, then those most likely need to be unified, or at least the same. Tom, did I say that right?
Yeah, I mean, there is a potential great benefit to have a unified curriculum for people that are offering commercial driver training instruction, because you don't have to worry about looking in two places to decide what you should be doing. Because it's my understanding that, you know, many of the commercial driver training schools have contracts with the public schools to offer the public school curriculum. At the same time, they're offering training to the public at large and offering the DOT curriculum. If the two curriculum are unified, the instructors only have to worry about doing one set of lessons. And while I have emphasized the enforcement, because that's what rules are, one would certainly hope that with a unified curriculum, it will be easier for the commercial driver training people to comply with everything, because you won't have to look in two different places. You won't have to worry about your contract with your local high school or your local school board versus the contract you have and the obligations you have to DOT. You got one set of obligations. Your teachers can go to one set of professional development. They can learn how to teach driver training one way. They won't have to be looking for amendments from DOT versus amendments from the state board. Life gets simpler. And when life is simpler, it's easier to follow the rules. And it will be better, I believe, for everyone if there's one set of instructional requirements. That's just my guess.
And if I'm speaking for Mike Newsom on the driver license office, I'm sure that would help to ease the communications once those students and students and parents end up downstream at the licensing office.
I guess this is Devin Tanner again. Maybe this is a question for Mike at DMV. How would having a concurrent curriculum affect the testing at DMV? So, for example, we in driver's ed by law are required to teach 6 hours of drug and alcohol and training, and we're also including a lot of discussion and teaching with regard to distraction within the car, phones and stuff like that. There's not one question on the DMV test when the kid goes to the office to get his permit. There's not one question about drugs and alcohol, as far as I know, having looked at the test bank. So does that affect the way that DMV will have to test kids?
I think, and Carl and I have kind of addressed this between the two of us quite often. We agree that there should be an alignment or realignment of the DMV testing to the current curriculum or a proposed curriculum. You're probably right. I hadn't seen the test blank in quite some time, but I would probably agree with you. Basically, the tests that DMV has are drawn from the DMV handbook mainly, but I would also agree with you that typically the average student that come in, has some challenges based on the curriculum that they went through as opposed to the test requirements for DMV testing. So to answer your question, whether it be a move on DMV's part or with the curriculum, I think the two just, at some point in time, like Carl has so often suggested, have to come to the table and just realign the standards.
Okay. Thanks for your answer, Mike. I appreciate it.
I would like to jump in here for just a minute, if I may, please. This is Marvin.
Go ahead, Marvin.
What Carl brought up and highlighted for me a while ago, we were looking at GS 115. If you look down to B4 and B5, the general statutes require us to not only have 6 hours drug and alcohol education, but 1 hour motorcycle safety. And then I don't think it specifies the length of time, but also instruction on traffic stops. And these things keep getting added in, and it takes away from the time we have in the 30 hours to cover the things we were previously covering. So, there need to be some things looked at here about the amount of time, especially like drug and alcohol education. Understand distracted driving right now is overtaking drinking and driving is one of the main causes of accidents out there. Do we need to spend more time with that? And Carl, I realize this is getting into your purview of the curriculum that you have developed and you're working on, but those are just questions popping up in my mind at this moment.
And those are very good points, Marvin. But back to the original question is when we recommend or when we get to a point where we can create standards on what is supposed to be taught, obviously these things that are in statute will need to be considered for the actual content or are included in those standards. However, as you can see, there is a need, and I'm sure that the Highway Patrol, being the law enforcement arm of this committee, could appreciate the consistency of the same information being taught by either one of the driver education entities. And that's where we are, is we're at this point where and do you feel as a committee, as a committee of expert stakeholders in this particular field, is there a need for the unification of such being that should we continue with the commissioner and the state superintendent collaborating on approving the curriculum for the commercial schools?
Well, Carl, this is Marvin. Let me jump back in there just a minute. I'm not opposed to a unified curriculum. I think that is wonderful coming from both sides. But I think we need to get it out there and get it working before we start talking about rules and enforcement and that sort of thing. See if we have a problem that needs to be regulated.
I do see difficulty in without using the LEAs, which coordinators, which there are 100 of them around the state. And a lot of this stuff, if there are issues within the program, if the LEA coordinator is doing their job, for example, and I've talked with Carl about this. For example, I've got 26 high schools here in Wake County, and if I find out due to talking to students or surveying or observing or whatever it is, I find out that 2 of my schools are not teaching safe police stops, for example. That's something that can very easily be taken care of quickly in-house. And I really think your best mechanism for oversight is by using your LEA coordinators. Now, and I'm not sitting in Carl's seat, that means you're going to have to put an abundance of trust in your LEA coordinators and making sure that, when we have coordinator meetings, we don't get all 100 of our coordinators. We have coordinators that are, absent to any of our trainings and things like that. So, I mean, that would be something else that would need to be taken care of. But I think your best oversight, in my mind, Carl, are the 100 coordinators out there that you already have overseeing their programs.
And I can appreciate your position on that. Although from a enforcement side of that, and Tom, you can, I would prefer you chime in on this part. That seems like it's a conflict of interest if you're talking about a rule.
Okay, I mean, you're also going to run into, like what Marvin said earlier, it'll be a he said, she said between the LEA and the private driving school. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too pessimistic about this, but I see those types of issues coming up.
Well, and so, and I don't want to direct the line of thinking of the committee. That is a question and an extensive part of the conversation that Tom and I had regarding that. But what you're talking about, the actual enforcement of it, without a process, or even to get started in this, we can't create the enforcement part of it. Of course, the enforcement of it is dependent upon the language that we use in drafting the standards. And so,
right.
So what you're talking about is, yes, those are going to be issues, but in the beginning of it is, how do we get back to the need? Do we have a consensus? And obviously today we're not looking for any answers. We're looking for opinions and potential roadblocks or objections that we might see down the road. Because rules, as Tom mentioned, and I don't want to even try to paraphrase what he just told us, but this is going to be, from my perspective, is quite complicated, and I spend a lot of my time in compliance and in statutory and administrative code of providing oversight for the districts.
Hey, this is Craig Azale. May I say something?
Yes, absolutely, Craig.
First of all, I'd be glad when we get together, and can talk and meet in person. A couple of my issues are, I've been in the public schools for 29 years, and the public schools are very accommodating. They're going to help you. They're going to help you pass and move on. The DMV general statute says this, and you can't do it. So there's a lot of, even last year during COVID, I said on this meeting, it was like, we're going to help these kids move on. Well, that's okay with the public schools, but with DMV, you can't do that. It's general statute says you have to do that, and that's wrong. And as a private school, I'm under the DMV because he pretty much can shut me down or do whatever he wants to. So it's, to me, there needs to come together on a lot of things. It's just like Reggie's teaching that class. That's awesome. It's awesome. Those guys take that class and they get certified. It's on their certificate. I got a lot of other guys that didn't take that class that are DMV certified. So the guys on the DPI certificate, they can get the certification that they're getting, like as a certified teacher gets when they're teaching a class, and their DMV rolls over. The DMV, Wendy gives us the 10 credits that you can take and get credits. Like mine are teachers, but they don't have it on their certificate. So it's kind of unfair for those teachers. They don't have to attend the workshop, but the ones who's not out on the certificate, they got to attend the workshops. A lot of it needs to come together, and it gets so confusing a lot of times because DMV, DPI, and I know with the curriculum as well. And here's another example that I deal with. And I don't know, nobody kind of knows, especially with DMV, in my humble personal opinion. DMV has a 611A form. I go to a public school, my driving school's got a 611A form. The public school doesn't. They're requesting my 611A form. That 611A form states that I taught the kid the class. But they want it and sign it. It's just confusing. The public schools ask, some do, some don't. Sometimes I have to send a 611A form that was issued to my driving school. So I just wish, and I don't know how to do it, but it needs to come together because we're getting pulled from the DMV, and then you got the DPI. So I hope I made some sense. I'd rather talk in person, but.
Well, I understood what you were talking about, and if I could respond to that, is that there is a administrative differences between DPI administration and DMV. However, and you being a contractor who is a DMV school that is operating under a contract, that does present some challenges. But the original question of this curriculum standard is just one point in everything that you just mentioned, and it is an issue. Yes, and whoever that is, state your name and go ahead and start talking.
Paul Deloitte, School Bus Traffic Safety Manager. All right, Craig, the 611s and 611As, just to throw this out there, we're hoping with this restructure of the admin code that the 611A will go away. So we're going to try to streamline that process. Back to the original question with Carl. I see that if we come to one curriculum across the board for DPI and for DMV, it will make it easier for enforcement. It will make it easier for compliance. It'll make it easier for the instructors and the schools, whether they be LEA schools, whether they be commercial schools. The hard part's going to come when it does come to the compliance and enforcement, because we're looking at that from two different areas. Carl and I have talked about this since I came in this position about 5 years ago. When it comes to being able to enforce the way that the things are done in a public school that's handled by a commercial school, it gets very convoluted. Those are the things that we're going to have to address down the line. But the first thing, in my opinion, because Mr. Zyko has been working on this hard and didn't realize all the end goal of this, so it makes it a lot easier on my mind. I think that by doing this and coming to one curriculum for both entities, for lack of a better term, it will make the job easier. It will make it easier to go ahead and move forward and teach a student what they need to know to be safe for all of the motoring public.
Thanks, Paul.
I agree.
Thanks, Paul. Tom, not that I'm moderating this part, did you have any additional? We are looking at 16 minutes before 1 o'clock, and that we want to make sure that that we have enough information from you all, and I guess Devin, there would be a motion to, or if need be, if the committee members want additional information, you can also call another meeting to follow up on this as well, and then we would have to coordinate with Mr. Zyko and see if that's a possibility. But continuing to move forward with this discussion, this is what we expected, and I don't want to hog the time here, but these are very good points. But as you can see, the course of study or the curriculum and the approval of is at the focal point, but there are other parallel or administrative issues that we also can come together and make this easier for everyone involved, actually.
Okay.
Carl, this is Marvin Smith. May I interject here for a moment?
Absolutely.
From what I'm sitting here listening to, no one is objecting to a unified curriculum. Let's go for it. Let's get it. Let's get it out there and get going with it. Then we iron out the problems that we're having, maybe commercial school, DMV. Let's talk through all this. But my thing is we're looking at some sort of enforcement of this thing. And I think we need to get everything together and out there and look and see what is the need for enforcement once we iron out all these problems. That's my point.
And not only that, when we do find that a rule is being abused and we do need to enforce, what is the consequence for that? What do we have, Carl, in the way of, is it the enforcement training, extra training? Is it withholding dollars? I mean, what types of things are out there that you can even give a consequence as?
Devin, if I can interject.
Sure.
Yeah, on our side, we can shut down a school temporarily or permanently based on their violations of the admin code or law. Now, on the DPI side, Carl will have to answer that.
Well, I will tell you this, that in 2011 or 12, there was a statute on the books that stated that if the district was not complying, that they could have their funds withdrawn. However, that's not there any longer. As I mentioned before, that is down the road and obviously when standards are created, and Tom, keep me in line here. When standards are created, we need to think of the potential of how we're going to facilitate that part of it. Am I correct?
Well, that's right. I mean, the purpose of a rule is to require compliance. If you don't want people to do it, then you don't need to put it in a rule. In fact, under the statutes, if the policy, whatever you want to call it, the policy, the guideline, the curriculum, is not binding, if there is no sanction associated with it, then it cannot be a rule. There's legal reasons for that and practical reasons. But the only thing that the Office of Administrative Hearings and the Rules Review Commission will approve is a rule that has enforcement attached to it. They don't want to have the administrative code full of guidelines and policies. So practically what that means is that when you write these rules, the rules must be written with the word shall. You can't say may. It has to be shall. You also cannot have a policy that exempts people from the rule unless the process for exemption is clearly spelled out, because you can appreciate that if you have a long rule and the last sentence is that DMV or the state board may exempt a school from the requirements of this rule, then you don't have a rule. So I don't want to emphasize the enforcement. I know it sounds like I'm the enforcer, but that's not the point. The point is that you have to be writing your rule with an eye toward enforcement, even if everyone always complies and you never enforce it.
Sure. So I think what we're hearing is that this process is going to be a lengthy process. I imagine that we will have education training subcommittee meetings about this throughout, and we need to decide alongside with Carl and the subcommittee on the advisory committee that, you know, is there a need for an enforceable rule, and what might those rules be with regard to following a standardized curriculum? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and that but again, this is more and my concern was from the very beginning when Tom brought this to us was that if I were a commercial school, I would be quite alarmed that a commercial school that did not have a contract or working commercially out there. I would be quite alarmed, and that's the folks that we were most concerned with, and that and then again, where Paul is that his group is in the position to where they're going to have to follow through with this as far as enforcement of the commercial schools. The public schools, again, the two agencies have their own groups that they oversee and provide oversight for. And obviously, as after this lengthy conversation, there is a need for some unification because of the fact that we are touching the same kids and the same kids are driving on the same roadway. So obviously there is a need for that. So,
okay,
Tom, moving forward, would you say that that I mean, from the consensus of this group, it sounds like that everybody is in favor of unification of the. Well, let's say this: if the superintendent is going to stay in a position to where that they must approve with the commissioner the curriculum for the commercial schools, that also means that the public schools needs to draft their standards and put them in, and I guess that we could refer to each other or point to the one to the other as the curriculum standards or course of study or program,
Right.
depending on which one we're going to use.
Right. Well, the terminology will have to be determined, but one solution would be for the State Board of Education working closely with the people at DMV and DOT to come up with a curriculum, approve that curriculum, and then have DOT, DMV have a rule that says that the curriculum for the commercial driver's schools shall be the curriculum approved by the State Board of Education. In other words, you unify them by putting them in one place and then have the other one reference that location.
And is that the question that or the recommendation already from the DMV side?
That I can't speak to.
Okay.
I know that the getting back to the beginning of this problem, it arose when the Rules Review Commission questioned DMV's authority.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments for Carl or Tom?
Before we go, Tom, if I could follow up with that one, I've been meaning to ask you that question. Do you know why the Rules Review Commission questioned DMV's authority?
Well, their note references the fact that there's a statute that exempts schools or classes conducted by colleges, universities, and high schools from DMV jurisdiction. And they also asked whether the DMV rule had been approved by the state board and the state superintendent, because the statute references that. They asked, did the state board approve this rule that DMV was proposing? And as I understand it, rather than challenge the Rules Review Commission on the DMV authority, the proposal was, well, why don't we explore the benefits and possibility of a single unified curriculum? And that was what prompted my involvement in the discussion.
I see. I see. Being that it's 5 till, Devin, I'm about to hand this back to you, but it's like, this has been an outstanding conversation. As far as Mr. Zyko, are you satisfied with the information that we received? Do you recommend follow-up conversation? We have the ability to call additional meetings if needed for additional information, and they would be.
Well, I think it would be useful to have a smaller group of people that represents the public school and the commercial driving schools to talk about what the curriculum should be, and to look at what the existing state board curriculum is, what the existing course of instruction is from DMV, what the national standards are, and the level of detail that they think the curriculum should have. And if we had a group of people that was a cross-section that could agree on the curriculum, bearing in mind, of course, that whatever is approved is the minimum. There's nothing that prevents somebody from teaching more. It's just that the rule would state the minimum. If we had that, it would make life a lot easier.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah, obviously there is members of our committee that that would be more downstream of what is discussed at that more granular level, and I can appreciate that. So Devin and Paul, could we agree to select members from the stakeholders of what Tom just mentioned and have a follow-up meeting that we can plan?
Yes, I think we can put together a subcommittee to get ideas, get notes down, and be able to present to the full membership of the committee.
Concur.
All right. So what we'll do is DPI will facilitate the communications between this committee and the DMV, Paul, and put out a meeting date or agree on a meeting date that we can get together and discuss this further. Obviously, we would need Mr. Zyko there in that meeting. So there were some other questions that popped up in chat before we get out of here. We'd like to make sure that they were answered before we. Cindy, or does anybody see them?
There are no questions. It was just communication, so we're good.
Okay. Devin, Mr. Chairman Tamminer.
Okay. Real quickly, Carl, under old business, any update of driver education strategic plan? Do you want to put a pin in that and talk about it next time, or do you have something that's imminent that you need to talk about with the strategic plan?
No, just to rehash what I had mentioned earlier was that given the number of things that are on our plates right now, we feel like that the best thing to do is put the strategic plan on a 5-year update cycle, and that we would shoot for 2025. But in the meantime, that we would go through and recommend changes and get those adopted, such as dates, anything that's obviously has already been accomplished or whatever, just to give us something to have as an updated strategic plan, because I think it's 8 years old at this point. But the recommendation is basically to put it on a 5-year cycle, and that would be 2025, 030, such as that.
Understood. Okay, we are over time. I appreciate Carl. Thank you so much. Tom, thank you for the wonderful presentation. It has spurred a lot of thought and some cans of worms that we need to actually probably have open. So we really appreciate your time addressing us as a committee. I just want to thank all the committee members and the advisors and staff for your preparation and for the discussion. And I want to remind you guys that our next monthly meeting will be held. For now, it's TBA. I'm hoping we can be at DPI, as this one was planned to be at DPI, and then we switched it due to the variant and a couple of positives that I guess were in the building. So the date of the next meeting, I believe, Carl, is the third Tuesday in November, which is the 16th. Is that correct?
Third Tuesday would be correct.
Okay, so that will be November the 16th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's 3 months from now, so we will give you ample time to know whether or not we're going to be virtual or you need to make it to Raleigh to the Department of Public Instruction for the next meeting. So we've now completed the meeting, and unless there's any other business at this time, which I don't believe there is, can I ask for a motion to adjourn? And please state your name.
Marvin Smith, so moved to adjourn.
Okay, and then do I have a second to adjourn?
Doug Gaylor seconds.
All right.
I don't know who came in first, but I heard Doug.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
See you all next time.
Thank you, and we'll see you on November 16th, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thanks all.
Thanks.